A millionaire made a bet to marry the only woman who ever told him no, and she had no idea. You played with my heart like it was a game. But I don't lose quietly. What happened on their honeymoon night left him speechless. Was it too late to make things right? Julian Cross had power, charm, and control, until Lena, a quiet interior designer, shattered his ego with one word. He chased her to win, but ended up falling. Now, with her heartbreaking secret revealed, can love survive the truth behind the lie? Before we begin, tell us where you're watching from in the comments. We'd love to know. And if you enjoy emotional, powerful stories like this one, make sure to subscribe and turn on the bell so you never miss a moment. Let's dive into it. The modern skyline of Westvale Heights sparkled behind a wall of glass as Julian Cross stood in his executive suite, swirling a tumbler of whiskey, one he barely tasted. His office was perched on the 40th floor of the Cross Innovations Tower, offering a full panorama of the city beneath. It was early evening, golden sunlight reflecting off steel and glass. Yet inside, the atmosphere was tense. Julian's best friend and closest confidant, Max Callahan, leaned against a sofa, watching him pace. Max had been Julian's college roommate at Westbridge University years ago. He was one of the few people who dared to tease the powerful CEO without fearing retribution. Max was tall, sharp-witted, and often served as Julian's personal devil's advocate. So as Julian fumed, scowling over Lena's rejection, Max merely sipped his bourbon with a raised eyebrow. Maybe she's just not into cocky billionaires, Max joked, a small grin tugging at his lips. Julian shot him a glare. Do you find this funny? A little, Max admitted. I've seen you close multi-million-dollar contracts after 5 minutes of conversation, and here you are, undone by one polite refusal. Julian turned toward the wall of glass. He stared at his reflection, the city lights shimmering beyond. I don't lose, he said softly. Ever. It wasn't a contest, Max replied. She just didn't want to go to dinner with you. Don't you think you're overreacting? In that moment, Julian's grip tightened around his glass. Something in him, a tangle of pride and wounded ego, spoke louder than reason. I'll make her fall in love with me, he said. I'll make Lena Marlowe my wife within 6 months. Max's eyes went wide. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then he set his glass down. You're serious. Dead serious, Julian declared. I'm putting down $1,000 on it, just to prove a point. Max wanted to say this was a bad idea, but the words wouldn't form. He recognized a steely resolve in Julian's eyes. This bet wasn't just about a woman. It was about Julian's sense of invincibility. And Max, half amused and half concerned, wondered if Julian had finally stepped onto a path he couldn't control. The very next day, Julian put his plan into motion. He made a call to Redwood Interiors, one of the most prestigious design firms in Westvale Heights, where Lena Marlowe was employed. He requested her personally for a major contract, the complete renovation and redesign of his penthouse in the heart of the city. The penthouse was notorious for its cold, austere lines, an architectural masterpiece perched atop the Redwood Tower, a luxury building with tinted windows that gleamed in the sun. It was the kind of high-priced real estate that appeared in lifestyle magazines and boasted about in property auctions. Despite its architectural fame, the interior was rumored to be lifeless, like a showpiece no one dared to make into a real home. Lena had no clue the request originated from Julian himself, at least not right away. Redwood Interiors assigned her because she was among their brightest talents, known for merging practical designs with an airy warmth that soothed the soul. For a young designer, she had an uncanny ability to strip away unnecessary flash and focus on human comfort. When she arrived at Redwood Tower for her first on-site meeting, a building concierge guided her to a private elevator. Her heart pounded. Slightly, this was a huge project, potentially career-defining. As she stepped out into the penthouse foyer, the doors slid open with a quiet hiss. The first thing she noticed was the floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a panoramic view of Westvale Heights The second thing she noticed was Julian Cross waiting for her, his arms crossed over a tailored suit. "You," she breathed, eyes narrowing. "Welcome," Julian said, a faint smirk on his lips. Lena calmly set her portfolio down. Professional, that was the word she repeated to herself. She needed to be professional above all else. "Mr. Cross," she said coolly, extending a hand. "Thank you for inviting me." Julian accepted her handshake. For a moment, he held on a fraction longer than necessary. "I heard you were the best. I want my place redesigned, top to bottom." "Then you'll get my very best work," Lena replied, though a flicker of annoyance crossed her face. She knew exactly what he was up to, or at least suspected it. Had something to do with that dinner invitation she'd refused. When she walked deeper into the penthouse, her design instincts took over. She began to move through each room, mentally cataloging the poor layout, the monotone grays, and the harsh overhead lights. It felt more like a museum than a living space. "This place," she said, turning to Julian, "has no soul." Julian lifted one eyebrow. "Maybe that's because I never needed one before," he replied, his tone half joking, half serious. An unexpected tension swirled in the air. Lena made a few notes and then turned back toward him. If her refusal had wounded his pride before, her casual dismissal of his home now threatened to bruise his ego. But Julian held it together, concealing whatever flicker of frustration he felt. He wanted her to be impressed. He wanted her to see him as more than an arrogant businessman. And in that subtle moment, the game began. In the weeks that followed, Lena visited the penthouse regularly. Some days, Julian would arrive unannounced, claiming he needed to understand her design process. Other days, he'd schedule formal appointments, always ensuring he'd get to see her. But Lena remained strictly business. She was polite, concise, and unwaveringly focused on the work. If Julian tried to charm her with small talk about her interests, she would politely nod and steer the conversation back to color palettes or lighting fixtures. Yet something changed on a Thursday afternoon. The sky outside was heavy with clouds, casting the penthouse in pale gray light. Lena was kneeling on the floor to review some color swatches when Julian strolled in, jacket slung over one arm. "You're early," she noted without looking up. "Couldn't wait," he said, a smile touching his lips. Instead of diving into design talk, Julian asked about her background, how she discovered her talent for design. Initially, Lena tried to keep her answers short, but as the minutes passed, she found herself explaining a childhood spent rearranging her bedroom furniture, painting her own walls, and persuading her single mother to let her design the living room each spring. "Your mother encouraged that?" Julian asked, tilting, his head with genuine interest. "She loved beauty," Lena replied softly. "Even if our budget was tight, she taught me how to make life feel open." Something flickered in Julian's gaze. He rarely spoke of his own family, mostly because he had little to say. But listening to Lena sparked a mix of curiosity and a strange longing he hadn't felt before. By the end of the day, they'd finalized a few design elements for the living room. As Lena gathered her belongings, Julian walked her to the door. "You're good at this," he said quietly. She paused. "Thank you. I mean, not just design. You're good at seeing right through places and people." Her eyes rose to meet his, and for the first time, they both fell into a silence that felt more profound than any conversation. That night, Julian stepped into Max Callahan's modern loft, pressing a code into a digital lock. Max greeted him with a glass of brandy, eyebrows raised. "Heard you two are getting along better than expected," Max said. Julian shrugged. "She's brilliant, if nothing else. I might actually get the penthouse I've always wanted." "And what about that crazy bet you made?" Max pressed. "Still think you're going to make her Mrs. Cross in 6 months?" "She'll come around," Julian replied, but his voice lacked the swagger it once had. He settled onto the couch, swirling the brandy. Suddenly, The thought of using Lena simply to bolster his pride felt hollow. He was actually beginning to admire her. Her quiet strength, her unflinching honesty, and her ability to stay true to herself even in the presence of a powerful man. Like him, it all intrigued him more than any investor or socialite had. But Julian's fierce ambition remained. Deep down, he refused to back down from any challenge. He had promised he would make Lena Marlowe love him, and love him she would, even if he himself was beginning to blur the line between game and genuine affection. A month later, the penthouse renovation was in full swing. Lena and her small team supervised the removal of old fixtures and installed modern, inviting ones. Soft textures replaced harsh angles, and warm tones overtook the sterile whites. Meanwhile, Julian found himself looking forward to her visits, as if they were the highlight of his week. One evening they worked late, finalizing a color scheme for the master suite. The city lights glowed beneath them as Lena spread out a series of swatches across the massive dining table. Her hair was down for once, a few stray strands framing her face. Julian couldn't resist taking a moment to watch her, the city's neon reflections dancing on her cheeks. "You know," Julian said, clearing his throat, "I had this place for almost 3 years. Never bothered to put my own stamp on it. Just let some corporate staging company do it." Lena glanced at him. "Because you never needed a real home? What I needed was an impressive space for entertaining business associates," he admitted. He paused, meeting her gaze. "But the more I talk to you, the more I realize how little I've understood about actual comfort, about a real life with heart in it." Lena studied him silently. Her defenses were still up. She didn't trust him entirely, but she also sensed a vulnerability beneath his polished exterior. "Everybody needs a place to breathe," she whispered, turning back to the swatches. That night, once the color palette was decided, they found themselves sitting on the floor, amidst leftover paint chips and cold takeout boxes, sharing glimpses of their personal histories. Julian spoke about being an only child, losing his mother in his teens, and having a father who treated him more like a protege than a son. Lena shared stories of her mother's unwavering faith in love, how it had led to heartbreak, and how Lena had grown cautious, especially about intimacy. Something about the conversation carried them to a depth neither had predicted. At one point, Julian told a joke about a design fiasco he'd once caused in a new office building, a story so ridiculous that Lena actually laughed, a genuine full sound. They fell quiet afterward, the warmth of the moment stretching like an invisible thread. Binding them, Julian leaned in, the distance between them so small he could see his reflection in her eyes. "You're different," he murmured. "It's like you see past all the walls I've built." She hesitated, then whispered, "Maybe I see them, because I've built my own." When he kissed her, the world outside seemed to dissolve. But as Lena later left the penthouse, the echo of a question lingered in her mind. Was this real, or was Julian Cross simply enthralled by another conquest? Days turned into weeks, and their relationship ventured into uncertain territory. They spoke of fears, of dreams, and on more than one occasion, they fell asleep talking on the phone late at night. Lena from her modest apartment, Julian from his sleek penthouse with new furnishings half installed. Neither admitted it openly, but affection was blossoming in a shared vulnerability. It was precisely at that time that fate decided to test them. One afternoon, while Lena was out buying materials, Julian wandered into the small office she'd been using in his penthouse. He was searching for a blueprint related to the kitchen layout, an excuse to rummage through her notes. His curiosity led him to a leather-bound folder stamped with the gold crest of Beck & Co., one of his fiercest competitors in the tech world. His heart pounded as he flipped through the documents. They included interior design trend reports, competitor analysis, and scribbled notes. "Why is she researching Beck & Co.?" he muttered under his breath. Old insecurities flared up. Julian had been betrayed in business before. partners who stole ideas, employees who leaked secrets. Now he wondered if Lena was acting as a spy or if she was somehow affiliated with Beck & Co. He was fuming with suspicion when Lena returned, arms full of sample books. She froze at the sight of him holding the competitor's documents. "Julian, what are you doing?" she asked, voice tense. "I should ask you the same," he snapped, lifting the folder. "Is this some corporate tie? Are you feeding them information about me?" Lena's cheeks flushed with both anger and hurt. "This is research for a new design approach," she explained, controlling her voice. "A friend at Beck & Co. owes me references on sourcing eco-friendly materials. I was going to present fresh ideas to you, ideas that your usual suppliers can't provide." Julian's anger simmered, his mind swirling with doubts he couldn't voice. For a few tense seconds, they stared at each other, the air crackling with mistrust. But then, to Lena's bewilderment, Julian didn't apologize. He set the folder down, turned on his heel, and left. She stood there with the samples in her arms, stunned, a pit forming in her stomach. A seed of doubt had been planted that day, an unspoken wedge driving them apart. A month later, Julian proposed marriage, seemingly out of the blue. They were alone in his penthouse after an argument about scheduling. Tension hung heavy, but then he knelt down, pulled out a dazzling ring, and uttered words that made Lena's heart pound. "I don't want to lose you. I can't. Marry me." She felt torn. Part of her suspected this was a patch job for whatever. Mistrust had begun festering. Another part of her, the part that truly cared for him, longed to believe it was genuine. Perhaps, she reasoned, love was strong enough to melt away his suspicions. They eloped in a small private ceremony at the Westvale Heights courthouse, with only Max and Lena's best friend, Nora Camden, as witnesses. The wedding felt hurried, almost improvised. Still, there was a certain beauty in their stolen glances, in Julian's protective arm around her waist as they signed the documents making them husband and wife. That evening, they boarded a plane for Aurora Bay, an archipelago famous for its turquoise waters and lush greenery, Julian's choice for a dream honeymoon. Aurora Bay was paradise incarnate. Their overwater bungalow rested on stilts, in a lagoon so clear they could see fish weaving among the coral below. The sun cast warm rays across the deck, and at night, candles flickered to the gentle sound of lapping waves. It should have been idyllic, and in many ways it was. Lena tried to let go of the swirling doubts. She inhaled the ocean breeze, let Julian hold her under the star-filled sky, and told herself this was real, that no bet or suspicion could tarnish genuine love. On their first night, after a candle-lit dinner, they returned to their bungalow. The space was illuminated by soft, golden lamps. Lena went to freshen up in the bathroom, emerging a while later wrapped in a simple white robe. She looked radiant, yet nervous. Julian smiled at her, stepping forward to adjust the dimmer on the lights. "You look perfect," he said, voice low, but he noticed her hesitance. Her eyes lowered, and her hands trembled slightly as she clutched the robe. "Is something wrong?" he asked gently. She took a breath. "I've never been with anyone before. Not intimately," she confessed, voice shaking. Julian froze. A wave of emotion flooded him, surprise, followed by a pang of guilt, remembering that the original spark of their relationship started with a bet. "We can take as long as you want," he murmured. "We don't have to rush." Tears glistened at the edges of her eyes. "I want this," she said, "but I need you to know how important it is. I'm trusting you completely." That night, they shared a closeness that Lena had never known. Yet after she fell asleep, content and secure, Julian lay awake, staring at the gently spinning ceiling fan. A tightness squeezed his chest as he recalled the day he'd boasted to Max that he'd win her. Had he truly stopped playing that game? Or was it still haunting them both? His heart pounded with a heavy guilt that refused to let him rest. Morning brought bright sunshine and fresh anxiety. While Lena showered, Julian stepped out to the veranda to answer a ringing phone. Max's name appeared on the screen. "Julian," Max said in an urgent tone, "we've got an issue back in Westvale Heights." "What sort of issue?" Julian asked, his stomach tightening. "Derek Sloan," Max said. "The ex-boyfriend Lena told you about, the one who walked away because she wouldn't sleep with him. He showed up at Cross Innovations. He's been talking to some of your investors, demanding to speak with Lena." Julian's jaw clenched. "Why? The hell would he do that?" "He knows about your marriage," Max explained. "He says he has critical information for Lena, and if we don't let him talk to her, he'll fly to Aurora Bay and do it himself." Julian's gaze drifted to the half-open doorway leading back into the bungalow, where Lena was humming softly. "Keep him away from Cross Tower," he ordered. "I'll handle this." But less than 24 hours later, while Lena and Julian walked along a wooden boardwalk suspended over crystal-clear water, they heard footsteps pounding behind them. A furious voice called out, "Lena!" She spun around, and there he stood, Derek Sloan. The man who'd broken her heart before. The man who deemed her too inexperienced to be worth the wait. Julian instinctively placed himself between them. "Leave," Julian commanded. "You have no right to come here." Derek's face twisted. "I have every right, because she needs to know the truth." Lena's eyes flicked from Derek to Julian. She sensed the storm brewing, but had no idea what truth he could be referencing. "What do you mean, Derek?" she asked quietly. Derek pointed an accusing finger at Julian. "He's been playing you from the start. He boasted he'd make you fall in love with him. He made a bet that he'd get you to marry him within 6 months." Time seemed to slow. The breeze rustled Lena's hair, her heartbeat thundered in her ears, and she looked at Julian. The stricken expression in his eyes told her everything. "Julian," she said, voice trembling, "is that true?" His gaze fell. "Yes," he finally whispered, "but it was before you decided you actually cared about me." She cut in, tears brimming. "Do you have any idea what this means? After what I gave you, what we just shared?" Julian reached out, desperate to hold her, but she stepped back. The raw betrayal twisting her features was worse than anger. It was heartbreak. She didn't scream or curse. She simply stared at him, tears slipping down her cheeks. "You took everything." "I'd never given anyone else," she whispered, "and you made it a game." Then, with a final look of crushing disappointment, Lena turned away, leaving Julian on that sunny boardwalk, emptier than he'd ever felt in his life. Lena left Aurora Bay the next morning without a word. Julian didn't try to stop her. Perhaps he knew he had no right to. She returned to her modest apartment in Westvale Heights, shutting herself away from the world. The gray walls and squeaky floorboards felt suffocating. Her best friend, Nora Camden, dropped by daily, bringing hot soup and gentle embraces. "You have to keep going," Nora urged one day. "Don't let his betrayal destroy your future." But Lena's pain ran deeper than words. She had opened herself to Julian in every way possible, emotionally, physically, and learned it had all begun as a twisted wager. She blamed herself for being naive, for wanting so desperately to believe he truly loved her. She sobbed into her pillow at night, cursing the day she met him. Yet underneath her devastation, she still felt a stubborn spark of love for the man who had shown her glimpses of genuine warmth. Within weeks, her world took another unexpected turn. Mornings brought waves of nausea, and she noticed how smells she'd never minded before made her stomach churn. At first, she blamed stress, but a routine check at a local clinic confirmed the truth. She was pregnant, 8 weeks along. A silent storm raged inside her, part terror, part hope. She recalled the gentle way Julian had once spoken of children in a passing conversation. how he had no siblings and joked about wanting a house full of kids to make up for it. But she pushed the memory aside. She decided to keep her pregnancy secret, at least until she found a place of emotional equilibrium. He had a right to know, but at the same time, she had a right to protect her heart and her baby from further damage. 2 weeks later, paparazzi photos surfaced online, capturing Lena leaving a pharmacy with prenatal vitamins in her hand. Tabloids pounced, plastering headlines about Julian Cross's ex-wife being pregnant. The rumors flew. Was she carrying the tech billionaire's child? Had she tricked him? Or was it someone else's baby? Julian saw the images on a late-night business trip. His heart nearly stopped. She's pregnant? He'd always prided himself on being a man who could fix anything. But right then he was paralyzed. He realized that if she was carrying his child, he'd become a father to the baby of a woman who likely despised him. At that moment, it wasn't about reputation or the potential scandal. It was about the fact he had let love slip through his fingers because of arrogance and deceit. Julian wasn't sure how to approach Lena. He feared that any attempt at contact might push her further away. Instead, he resolved to act in the only way that made sense to him, by taking care of her from a distance. He arranged for a private medical team, under a confidential retainer, to discreetly ensure Lena could access the best prenatal care. Anonymous shipments of top-quality vitamins and nutritious meal boxes arrived at her doorstep weekly. Each package bore a simple note. For the baby, no strings attached. She recognized Julian's hand in this, of course, but she neither confirmed nor refused the help. She was too emotionally raw to speak to him, and yet deep down, she appreciated that he hadn't tried to manipulate or coerce her. Julian also purchased a vacant studio space near her apartment, an airy, sunlit spot with large windows. He paid to have it cleaned, painted, and lightly furnished, then quietly had a single key delivered to Lena with a note that read, "A place to start again, if you want it. No strings." When she unlocked the door for the first time, she found a desk, blank sketchbooks, and shelves waiting to hold new inspiration. She knew only one person truly understood how her creativity thrived in open spaces. She swallowed hard, pressing a hand to her abdomen, where a faint flutter reminded her that life was growing inside her. Still, Lena wasn't ready to forgive. Not yet. The tension between them remained like a drawn bowstring, but Julian persisted, with quiet gestures of care, never demanding a response. Over the following weeks, Lena began to visit the studio occasionally. She'd sit by the large windows, letting sunlight warm her, gently resting her hand on her baby bump. Sometimes she'd doodle design ideas, though her creativity felt tangled in heartache. One gray afternoon, as rain pattered against the windows, there was a soft knock at the studio door. Lena opened it to find Julian standing there, soaked from the downpour, no umbrella in sight. "You'll catch a cold," she scolded automatically, stepping aside so he could enter. "I needed to see how you're doing," he said, voice gentle. "How the baby is doing." She offered him a small towel, their eyes meeting with a mixture of longing and hesitation. "We're fine," she said simply, wrapping her arms around herself. "I'm learning to get through each day." Julian nodded. He didn't push for details. Instead, he quietly replaced a flickering overhead bulb in the hallway that Lena had complained about weeks ago. He left almost as quickly as he arrived, with a subdued, "Take care." After that, Julian made it a habit to drop by once or twice a week, never unannounced, never overbearing. Sometimes he would leave a loaf of fresh bread or home-cooked meals from a local catering service. Other times, he'd bring design books or notes on interior showrooms that might interest her. Every gesture was consistent, respectful, and without demands. Gradually, Lena's animosity dulled. She still remembered the bet, the betrayal, the heartbreak. Yet she couldn't deny Julian was changing, step by step. One day, While cleaning a stack of old sketches, she found a small note tucked between the pages in Julian's distinct handwriting. "I'm sorry for everything. If I can't erase the past, let me at least build a future for our child. And maybe, one day, with you." Tears blurred her vision. She closed the sketchbook and pressed a palm to her belly. Was it possible for someone to truly change? She didn't. No, but she decided to find out. That night, she called Julian for the first time in months. "I need help installing shelves in the studio," she said. "Are you available tomorrow?" A brief pause, then his voice, hopeful. "Of course, I'll be there." When Julian arrived, they quietly worked side by side, carefully measuring and drilling. Lena's belly was more prominent now. She was nearly 6 months along. Occasionally, Julian reached out to steady her or help her stand, each time a gentle reminder that they were connected, if not reconciled. As the due date approached, Lena grew accustomed to Julian's presence. He took her to prenatal appointments, never stepping on her independence but always standing by for support. Nora noticed the change and whispered, "He really cares about you and this baby, doesn't he?" Lena would only nod, her feelings tangled between lingering hurt and cautious optimism. Finally, on a crisp autumn afternoon, Lena went into labor. Julian rushed her to Westvale Heights General Hospital, his heart pounding with fear and excitement. For hours he held her hand, wiped the sweat from her brow, and murmured words of encouragement. The pain was intense, but Lena clung to Julian's steady presence like an anchor. In the late afternoon, a baby girl entered the world, wailing loudly before being placed on Lena's chest. Tears of pure relief and awe streamed down Lena's cheeks. Julian hovered beside her, overwhelmed by emotion. The tiny, squirming bundle was his daughter, a living testament to love, heartbreak, and second chances. Lena named the baby Olivia Rose, a nod to the delicate, hopeful bloom she represented in their lives. The next day, Julian approached Lena's hospital bed. His eyes were soft, the lines of stress easing now that mother and child were safe. Carefully, he set down a small box. Not a typical jewelry case, but a wooden container decorated with intricate carvings. "What's this?" Lena asked, her voice still raspy from exhaustion. Julian opened the box. Inside was a simple silver chain with a small pendant shaped like a heart. He handed Lena a folded piece of paper, covered in Julian's handwriting. She read it silently. "Lena, I once thought a diamond ring was the symbol of real commitment. But I learned it's more about the bonds we form, the promises we keep, and the love we nurture over time. I'm not offering you a shiny rock today. I'm offering my time, my support, my entire self for you and our child. I can't undo the past, but I can vow that every day forward I will earn your trust, your forgiveness, and maybe one day, your love again." When she finished reading, tears slipped down her cheeks. She glanced at Julian. He held Olivia in his arms, swaying gently to calm her fussing. "Julian," Lena began, her voice trembling with fresh tears. But he shook his head. "No pressure," he whispered. "No demands. Just let me be part of her life, and yours, if you'll allow it." The monitors beeped softly. The corridor beyond was filled with murmurs of nurses and the faint hum of hospital machinery. Lena's heart thudded. She recalled the pain. But she also saw the transformation in this man who had once bet on her heart as if it were a commodity. She looked at her newborn daughter's tiny fingers curled around Julian's thumb. "We'll take it one day at a time," she managed, brushing her tears away. "As parents first, and maybe, in time, we can talk about being more." A hopeful flicker lit Julian's eyes. He pressed a gentle kiss to Olivia's forehead. 4 months later, Westvale Heights was blanketed in soft snow. Lena's new studio thrived with creative energy, and she found her footing as a freelance interior designer, taking on projects that allowed her to balance work and motherhood. Julian visited every evening, bringing groceries or dinner from local restaurants. Sometimes, he just stopped by to hold Olivia while Lena took a quick shower or finished a design draft. Little by little, the lines of tension softened. Lena accepted Julian's help with less resentment, acknowledging the sincerity behind his actions. They didn't share a home yet, but they shared something deeper now: mutual respect, accountability, and an unconditional love for Olivia. A brisk Saturday afternoon, as twilight painted the sky in shades of lilac, Julian invited Lena to Redwood Tower. He had one final surprise. He led her to the penthouse's newly transformed living space. Gone were the cold grays and impersonal décor. Warm wood, comfortable chairs, soft lighting, and potted plants created a harmonious blend of modern chic and welcoming warmth. A framed photograph of Olivia sat on a mantel, her round cheeks and bright eyes capturing the essence of a future they all deserved. "This is my real home now," Julian said, turning to Lena. "A place with a soul." Lena looked around, tears threatening to spill. "It's perfect," she whispered, remembering how she'd once described it as soulless. Now, every corner breathed life. Standing there, cradling Olivia, Lena realized how profoundly people can change when confronted with the loss of something they desperately want to keep. She glanced up at Julian, a soft smile crossing her lips. "Maybe we can move forward," she admitted, voice trembling with long-suppressed hope. "All three of us." Julian swallowed, relief washing over him. He reached for her free hand, and this time, Lena didn't pull away. The twist: the man who had everything learned that real wealth isn't measured in dollars or conquests, but in humility, redemption, and the willingness to change. And Lena, who had always guarded her heart, discovered that sometimes the strongest love grows from the deepest wounds. They never forgot the rocky path that brought them here. But as they stood in that once cold penthouse, the snow falling silently outside, they understood one thing with absolute clarity. They were finally building a home together. Sometimes the harshest betrayal can lead to the greatest transformation. When we let go of our pride and fear, we discover that forgiveness isn't just a gift we grant another. It's a chance to free ourselves from the shackles of anger and regret. Julian bet on love for the wrong reasons, but he won in the end by earning it the right way. Have you ever felt torn between protecting your heart and risking it all for someone who might change? Share your own story or thoughts in the comments below. If this journey touched your heart, click the like button, share it with friends who might need a reminder about the power of second chances, and subscribe for more stories that reveal the beauty and the pain of our shared humanity. Remember, no one is beyond redemption if they're willing to truly fight for it. Thank you for watching, and until next time, stay hopeful, stay open, and never underestimate the healing power of genuine love.